everybody's metrics. And then, of course, there's always that long-standing problem of how does this stuff become repeatable, reliable media, and how does it fit within that larger media structure in the way that Sasa just illustrated. So to take up this topic of the new economy of the social influencers and where we stand now, we have Kerry Perse, who's the managing director at OMD Create. She heads the social media practice for OMD and works with clients like Pepsi, McDonald's, Nissan, and State Farm. Please welcome our panel on social influencers.
Thank you. Thank you so much for such a great introduction. We're all really happy to be here, and you know, we did an amazing prep call, right, to make sure we have a nice cohesive panel for all of you guys today. And what we found on the call was that we all have kind of a different POV and a different perspective on how to use influencers because of the role that we play within our organization or our type of organization. So we're going to just do some quick introductions, and we're going to talk a little bit about kind of our personal perspective on influencers, and then we'll take a little bit of a deeper dive into how we engage with them, how we measure success, and what we really look for when we try and select kind of the key and perfect influencer partners. So my name is Kerry Perse, and I oversee a group called OMD Create within OMD, which is a media agency. And my team really oversees the creation of content, influencers, social marketing. But because we are embedded within a media agency, we really view influencers as a great way to reach consumers with very authentic content, kind of support a brand effort. But we hold our influencer engagements accountable the same way we do media by focusing on kind of the key performance indicators that they're driving. So with that, I would love to introduce the rest of the panel, and they'll each tell you a little bit about their perspective.
Hi everyone, my name is Lauren Clinton. I lead social and content at the Scotts Miracle-Gro company. So we have a pretty broad range of CPG brands covering the lawn and garden space, and my team is responsible for social content and strategy, whether it's organic or paid, and then also any of the owned content that lives on our digital properties. So that could be websites or our mobile apps, and then we also kind of work with our sponsorship and partnership teams as well. And I would say, you know, influence marketing and the idea of influence in marketing is something that, you know, we try to, you know, really leverage from a full funnel perspective. You know, from a top of funnel perspective, Scotts Miracle-Gro is a super old company. We are 150 years old this year. It was our 150th birthday. So, you know, we really have found, you know, a great partnership in influencers to really kind of help adapt brand perception and modernization as well. So, you know, that's certainly one way that, you know, we view influence, and all the way down to kind of the micro-influencer level and engaging our social brand advocates that engage with us in our channels all the time as a part of our communities as well.
Hi everyone, I'm Jess Newton. I'm a VP Digital Strategist at Arnold. We are an ad agency in Boston. I lead the team of social and content and influencer experts, and we work across a variety of brands, CPG, non-CPG, financial services, you name it. We kind of have experience across the board because we are working across a variety of clients. When it comes to influencer marketing, we're really all about content creation and compelling, engaging content that tells a story, is genuine, is authentic to the brands that we're working with, and is very thoughtful in the role that it plays from a larger integrated marketing perspective. A lot of times we work with very specific campaigns, or we do it on a more evergreen basis where it's just baked into one of our clients' social or content programs that are always on. One of the things that we really look for when we play with influencers and create content is really just making sure that it aligns to what the brand is doing and telling that genuine story, because otherwise it really just becomes hashtag ad. And we don't want it to be that. We want it to be all about in partnership with the brand. So that's pretty much, you know, the filter with which we kind of work to put influencer programs in place.
Hi everyone, my name is Amanda Sims. I work for Premier Nutrition Corporation. I directly manage the influencer marketing programs for both Premier Protein and Power Bar. And we really work across a range of influencers, from micro-influencers to high reach content creators to develop content not only for our own digital channels, especially social media and web, but also for our paid media campaigns. And one of our big objectives from the brand side is to increase awareness. So we're really more top of the funnel compared to Lauren. But how we leverage our influencer relationships is to develop that content and really build awareness amongst our target audience and promote discoverability amongst their communities.
Great. Well, thank you so much. So this just gives you a good sense of kind of the lens through which, you know, each of us really work with influencers. We're going to kick the panel off with a question that we're all going to answer because I think it's a topic and it's certainly a question that has been getting a lot of attention lately. How do you pick the best influencers to work with? What are the criteria? What do you look for? What is your process? And so for the panel, if you don't mind sharing, kind of what are the top 3 criteria you look for when selecting an influencer to partner with and why?
So, I would say when we evaluate influencers, we are, primarily looking for a good brand match. So what are the kind of core tenets and values that are true for the brand, and do we see that reflected in the influencer and in their content and kind of how they manage their content and communities? I would also say that we also look to make sure the quality of content looks nice. I mean, I think we are leveraging influencers a lot of times for content production and creation capabilities. So just from a visual aesthetic perspective, how does that look? And then we also look to just make sure there's kind of a level of like real personness, I think a little bit different than authenticity, but we just make sure, it's not just sponsored post after ad after ad after ad. And, this is somebody who has, spent some time creating, their own brand and their own communities. And, we really try to make sure all that matches.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Jessica.
So my answer is not much different, but I would say it's certainly the quality of content, making sure that it aligns to the brand and what we want them to create for us, and is it going to augment the work that's already in market, or is it going to feel like it's completely different? Tone of voice, personality, the point of view that they bring to the table. Again, we want to make sure that it's not totally in outer space, but it feels really complementary to what's already happening. And I think from a strategic perspective, it's making sure that there is a role for it as it relates to the goals that we've set forth for whatever that particular campaign is. So when we look across the funnel, for example, we're not looking for influencers to sell a product. We're not asking them to hold something up and say, please buy this, look at this product, it's all about the product. We're really trying to engage with them a little bit more and really leverage their audience to make a better connection to the brand. So it's really all about driving those upper funnel metrics and making sure that it, sorry, I'm being distracted. Making sure that it really ties back to those primary KPIs that we've kind of established from the upfront.
I think from the brand side, we definitely agree in terms of like brand fit, so making sure that influencers' value on their social channels aligns with our brand values and our brand pyramid. The other thing we really look for is a passion for the brand or the product, which isn't necessarily easy if a high-reach influencer hasn't heard of your brand before. So we really take a lot of time to cultivate these relationships by sending them the products beforehand, getting on a call with them, and we can quickly tell whether or not they're really excited to use this product in their daily life and can speak about it in an authentic way, or they're just looking for it in the paycheck. The other thing we look at in terms of content is not just the amount of content that we can repurpose, but what voids can the influencer fill with their content that we don't currently have. So I think a good example is we were looking for some live video content that we couldn't produce in-house, and so we reached out to some influencers who specialized in Facebook Lives and other live video content. And in that way, we really had this nice, diverse portfolio of content formats that we wouldn't have had we not partnered with these influencers.
Yeah, I think, I absolutely agree with so many things that you guys were just saying. Influencers need to create great content, and I think influencers are a great example of the perfect combination of art and science. So in addition to being the perfect brand fit and creating amazing content, from the media perspective, we also will take a look at their kind of past historical performance data to see, are they actually able to deliver an effective CPM or a cost per view? We'll also think about things like brand safety, like is this the right environment and are they creating kind of the right context with which we want a brand to show up? So I think, in combination with brand fit and content, and then also potentially layering on some intelligence about how they've performed in the past, it's a really good approach to picking influencers. So the next topic we're going to cover is, we're here to talk about the new economy of influencers. There's a number of different ways you can engage with them. There's a bunch of different negotiation points. So we're going to talk a little bit about how the various panelists really engage with different influencers and what their preferred model is. So, there's a lot of conversation around, do I go to an influencer directly? Is there a benefit or a drawback to using a network? So I know that Amanda really has some great thoughts on kind of how to foster direct relationships.
So I know you guys have heard a lot about Premier Protein if you've been here since this morning, but this brand's really grown based on word of mouth and our fandom community. So for us, it's really important to work with our influencers directly versus going through a network. We're working with our influencers on a long-term basis, so think at the minimum yearly contracts and across multiple campaigns. So for us, it's really important to own the brief and own the feedback, because we found over time the collaboration efforts just take off in terms of engagement and content produced. So that means that the longer we worked with these influencers, we're able to repurpose more of their branded content, and the branded content that they produce is also performing well on their channels. I will say the downside of this. It does take some time if you're an agency or in-house to work with these direct relationships. You're answering a lot of emails, a lot of phone calls, and really harnessing them. But I think for us, the benefit outweighs the risk.
Yeah, no, it's a great perspective, and I think we have a little bit of the opposite perspective. I don't know if we're inherently lazy, but we generally work through networks because it does take a lot of project management. What we have found is that when you do go through a network, everybody has access to very similar talent pool, and you can often get great results. They are not as long-term, I will say, as when you do go direct and kind of put the extra effort in. So I think it's all about how quickly you want to activate and how much heavy lifting you want to do versus, how do you want to build those long-term relationships, right, that are often very fruitful. So another thing to consider when you're negotiating with an influencer is content usage rights and terms. So I know both Jess and Lauren have very kind of good experience and some good perspectives on kind of how they negotiate content usage and terms.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, sure. So from a usage perspective, so many of our brands, are in the lawn and garden category, and one piece of content could, have a long and useful life across many other brands or other channels. So when possible, we always kind of lead our influencer engagements with, a singular strategic business objective. But, at the end, if there is, another kind of second life that we can, put this really awesome content to work, we'd like to do that. So we always try to negotiate for rights in perpetuity. We use non-union talent, everything that will kind of extend the life of that content. And I think it's really important to think forward, into the future. If you are, creating content and using it in owned properties, you could be creating risk later on down the line if you all of a sudden have to kind of pull that content back. And that was something, we experienced in my first year at Scott's. We found that, somebody several years ago had contracted somebody to create a bunch of really awesome SEO content for the websites, and all of a sudden the rights were up, and all of a sudden we had to pull down all this awesome web content. And, it's just something that if you're planning for longevity of content and then also efficiency of your spend and not having to kind of, re-renew rights to things, when all the time or every 3 years or 5 years is something to keep in mind too.
Yeah, I would say for us, it's really important in that contractual stage because we're handling a lot of the relationships directly, like Amanda. So when we're doing it, it's all about not only just what makes sense for the budget and how long can we use the content for, but making sure we have the usage rights to use on our own channels or the brand's own channels to potentially be used in paid media. are there website implications, especially if we're talking longer form or editorial content that may not necessarily be living on social, but if it's living on a website as part of a content program or part of just, a brand's website and augmenting anything that they may have there. So it's really, really important for us to try to negotiate perpetuity where possible. Obviously, budgets can prohibit that, especially when you're talking about some of these more established influencers who have a lot of followers, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But where you can, trying to make sure that you're always thinking about not just the rights for own channels, but can it be used in paid and can it be used elsewhere, and what's the potential, should it become a commercial, or should you want to use that piece of photography in out of home? So thinking through not just the use in the immediate moment, but where it could go from there is really, really crucial to that initial contract development as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So another, topic that, is very popular and we hear a lot of questions around, certainly from an agency perspective, is what's the best kind of operating model for working with influencers? Is it an evergreen perspective? So do you want to really find a stable of influencers that are loyal to your brand and produce great content and keep going back to them and feel like it's an always-on presence? Is it something you want to dial up from a campaign perspective to kind of almost create adjacent or augment the brand content, for key campaign moments? And so I would love to hear from Amanda and Jess on how they really view evergreen versus campaign-based.
So I'm going to say a little bit of both. So we use our influencers' content as an evergreen, always on. So that means that they're completely integrated in our social channels. We use a lot of their UGC. We have a community page on our website where we have more information about our influencers, and they're really part of our digital strategy overall. However, we do brief them on a campaign basis. So whenever we turn them on, it is for specific campaigns, whether that's bi-monthly or a few times a year. We just think it's important for us to remain authentic to our followers. So if you see one of our influencers in our paid media campaign, you also can find out more about them on our website and our social channels. It's not a one-off post, and in that way, that's how we remain authentic.
For us, a lot of times it really depends on, again, going back to the objective of the brand. We work with a lot of brands who are using content creators on an ongoing basis because it just helps them develop content for their social stream and really, fill gaps where we as the creative agency may not be developing content, or they want to do things that they can produce at a more rapid pace. And so we're getting lots and lots and lots of content from the influencer. So sometimes the influencer itself isn't necessarily the core objective here, where it's just about we need an arsenal of content and they're helping us do that. Where other times, primarily from a larger campaign perspective, this is where it really could potentially help drive reach and awareness and engagement if we're launching a new product or if we're coming out with a new brand message. So we kind of work across the various uses of them, whether it's evergreen and they're always on and we're kind of introducing new ones throughout the year, or maybe we're working with one across the board for the entire year, or it's very campaign specific to a very specific need to help, like I mentioned earlier, kind of round out that full integrated marketing mix for a specific moment in time.
Yeah, no, such interesting perspectives. So we talked a lot about what's your top criteria? How do you engage with them? I feel like the influencer space continues to get more and more sophisticated. And I think that type of sophistication and transparency actually benefits the marketer. But it brings us back to kind of a fundamental question and where we started. Do follower counts really even matter anymore? Is this something that we should use to factor in whether we work with an influencer? So Lauren and Jess, I know you have some strong opinions.
Yeah. I would say a lot of the ways that we apply kind of the either influencer generated content or the way that we activate influencers is using paid dollars. So, you know, we're really not focused on what their follower count is, because we know that we're going to leverage paid media and kind of whitelist or boost their content so that it appears in partnership with the brand, and you're able to reach outside of, you know, what that owned community might be. You know, and there are a lot of benefits to that. You can apply different targeting, and I think you also are not kind of like at the jeopardy of like whatever the algorithm was going to expose your content to from an organic perspective. And then there have also been, you know, times where from an always-on organic perspective, follower count is a consideration.
So we always like to tell our clients to forget the follower count, at least in the upfront of what we're doing. You know, when we're thinking about the way that an influencer might distribute content, if it's on their social feeds and we're thinking organic only, we're up against Facebook's algorithm, Instagram's algorithm, and the reach really is so limited, which is why it's so important to expand how that content gets distributed and use it on owned and then within paid media channels. But the thing is that some of these smaller micro influencers can be so great for a niche audience or a very specific target, or they're just beautiful content creators. We recently worked with a photographer for a hummus brand that we work with, and she developed the most incredible stuff. And it was not because we couldn't do it internally, it was we were just augmenting some of the work that we were putting out there. And for $800, we got incredible content. And so now not only is she going to augment her channel with this content and help us launch a new product, but we have a whole new arsenal of creative that we can put out in social and use across the board.
Yeah, you know, absolutely. I think the one thing I would add to that is if you are able to verify that an influencer's followers are, first of all, real human beings, right? So they're not fake. Follower count is an indicator of influence, right? So those people did choose to follow them. So I think overall it's a consideration, but it is by no means kind of have the weight that that it used to.
Can I ask a quick question? Sorry.
Yeah.
With the news out about like influencers with the bots and their traffic, a chunk of their traffic is fake, and some of the new stats out by that new company points north, it could be anywhere from 25 to 60%. Are you starting to audit more because of this? And what was it? Who was this CMO of Unilever came out and said we're auditing all of our influencers and cracking down on this? But is that changing kind of how you're working with them or changing your behavior at all? I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, it's good.
I would just say from our perspective, the upfront kind of exploratory phase before we even engage with the influencer is really important. So it's kind of just turning up the dial a little bit there and making sure that when we are auditing them from the get-go, we're looking at their credibility and the legitimacy of who they are as an influencer, their followers, and then, you know, other brands that they've worked with, the type of content that they're producing. So if there are any red flags, we raise them in the beginning.
Yeah, I would also, you know, add to that, just coming from a media agency, so many of our decisions are driven by the data that we're able to have access to. And so there are platforms out there that do track both the acquisition patterns of individual influencers as well as the engagement patterns. And so this will give you a good indication as to whether they have real influencers. So if you see, you know, if someone gets 10,000 followers overnight, you can bet that they have a lot of bot activity. If you see a lot of engagement activity on a post 4 days after it's posted, it's likely that that is a lot of bot activity, right? So I think there are ways to kind of track their patterns, and then you can kind of assess them from there. Yeah, no problem. Great question. Okay, so we've picked our awesome influencers. We've decided that follower count is not the end-all and be-all, and we go into negotiations with an influencer. I think, you know, one of the key questions is, so these are not, as much as we'd like to think that they are potentially the new media, they are not media publishers, they are not media property, they're human beings. And it's important that we're able to hold them accountable, but still understand kind of the nature of their business, that first and foremost, they are responsible for their brand because that is their product. They're responsible for delivering the type of content to their followers that they have come to expect and appreciate. And so I think it's really important to have a discussion around how we make sure that the influencer delivers what they promise in a way that will still facilitate kind of future relationships. So, one of the key things that we're chatting about in the beginning as to kind of what our top criteria were for picking influencers was quality of content, right? I think we all agree that if you don't pay an influencer to create crappy content, you want to make sure that they are really doing your brand justice and the partnership justice. So why don't you guys talk a little bit about, how you ensure that the influencer is creating the type of high quality content you're really looking for. So I don't know if we want to start with Amanda. We can move our way back.
So like I said before, we're working with these influencers on a long-term basis. So to Jess's point, we really need to do our homework in the upfront to vet these influencers to ensure that they're not only creating content for organically that they're proud of, but their other branded content, is it have the effort and the same quality as their organic content. So we really look at engagement primarily of their audience of this content and whether or not if they have branded or sponsored content, that the audience is asking quality questions about the product or whatever they're promoting, and then that influencer is also engaging with them in that content. So I would say it's very difficult to have those hard conversations, and we have had them, about influencers who aren't holding up their end of the bargain in terms of content, but I think you can really preempt the fact that know what kind of influencer you're partnering with in the upfront if you look across their digital portfolio.
So for us, this one's a bit of a balancing act because we're not only dealing with the influencer, we're dealing with the creative teams and the clients. So there's a lot of voices who want to have an opinion as to how that content's being created. So for us, it really just comes down to process and making sure that once the influencer is hired, we have a very purposeful process in place so that everyone has a voice, but we're still remaining true to who that influencer is. It's not like a traditional piece of advertising or content where a client really can say, we want to change this word, and this word, because then it becomes not something that's colloquial, or it feels like it's coming from a brand versus the human being, like Kerry was saying, behind the piece of content. So we make sure that there's a brief for the influencer. The creative teams are part of that briefing process. The clients signed off on that brief. We have guidelines, creative, tone of voice, personality that we provide to them, but we never try to really give so much direction that it feels like the influencer is losing control of their content. We want it to feel native to the type of things that they're already creating, that they're already posting, that they're already writing. And we've certainly been in situations before where the quality suffers or the influencer just says forget it because the clients kind of tried to push too hard. The creative team had a different vision from the upfront. So it's really just making sure that that process in the upfront is fully in place and everybody's on board.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's how we've found kind of the best success in creating, quality content is making sure we have process in place and then, just really clear expectation setting and, doing that via meetings or via, really simple and concise briefs that really try to respect everyone's space, right? Like we want to make sure that we are respectful of, the influencer's content creation process and what feels authentic to them and what they're trying to build, but also something that, matches to the brand as well. And, it can definitely be tough when, you have somebody who's leading the relationship directly with an influencer. You might have a brand partner who has got to hit those 3 product claims as a part of the, as part of the post and everything. So I think just really clear expectation setting and, remembering, just making sure that that content is going to do what it is designed to do. What is the purpose of it? And just setting up really what that expectation is. Otherwise, you can get into a really kind of fuzzy what is good versus bad. People can kind of interpret results differently.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think in addition to, really creating great, compelling content, we are paying them real money, right? So we want the content to perform. And I'd love to hear from Amanda a little bit about like how do you really track and make sure that the influencer content is performing to your expectations?
Yeah, so for every campaign that we do, we implement a tiered structure of both micro-influencers, so that can be anywhere from our real fans or people who have very small followings, but to Jess's point, are very powerful in niche communities, to some of those higher reach content creators. And we found the benefit is really blending both of them. So we're getting the great quality of content from those professional Instagrammers, if you will, but also hitting those engagement numbers with those micro-influencers. And that way we've ensured from the get-go that we're hitting our KPIs across each campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and one of the key ways to really make sure that you're hitting your KPIs and the content is performing is that it actually goes up on time and is aligned with either a campaign effort or the kind of key moment that you're trying to surround. So I think it's also important to delicately work with influencers. We don't want to rush their art, but how do we actually get them to kind of adhere to an expedited process or a posting schedule? Jess.
So again, it just really goes back to that process. And again, because we work with them directly, we have a little bit more influence in terms of making sure that they're doing what they should be doing when. But a lot of times it's just in that, you know, once you decide how much content will they be making and what will they be contributing, when then are they posting it on their social channels? When are they writing the content on their blog? And then aligning that to whatever the client might be doing so that we're really kind of augmenting the reach and making sure that that piece of content is getting as much exposure as it can within that period of time. And again, it's like almost as if that planning process is more important than the actual piece of content itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, one more thing from a media perspective, a lot of times when we do engage with influencers, we will negotiate our engagement with them like on a CPM basis or a CPV basis to make sure that they're delivering kind of the key media metrics we're looking for. And so one of the ways that we do actually verify that they're delivering the reach and impressions that we're kind of contractually obligated to is by adding in our own tags to verify both viewability as well as delivery. So you can also, if you work through a network, it's harder certainly to do that when you have a direct relationship because they're like, what is this tag, right? But if you actually do work with a network that uses their kind of technology to facilitate the posting, you are able to kind of add in your different verification methods. So all good things on the road to making sure that influencers are delivering real results. Okay, so, you know, obviously a hot topic this year was brand safety. So, you know, I can't tell you how many emails I got after a few unnamed influencers on YouTube potentially got in some trouble. And they're like, is this what we're doing? I'm like, no, you're not. Don't worry about it, right? So would love to hear from Lauren about kind of your approach to brand safety and making sure that the content that influencers create is the right environment.
Yeah, sure. So, you know, I think we have you know, it's definitely some challenges with brand safety. You know, a lot of our products, it might be, you know, potting mix or, you know, lawn fertilizer, but it's chemicals and it's regulated. So we have a lot of, you know, legal, you know, guidelines and things that we have to be aware of just from like a messaging standpoint down the road. But to your point, you know, so much work is done pre-campaign to even get us to feel like we're in a safe place and we feel like we're making good choices for the brands and for what our business objectives are. And, you know, that can include, you know, I guess from a pre-launch perspective, you know, we do a pretty in-depth, you know, dive within the channels of each influencer. So really looking at the influencer themselves, you know, do their values feel like they match with ours? What are the types of content pillars that they create content around normally? How do people react to those things? We do keyword searches or, you know, just kind of visual searches on, you know, platforms like Instagram to see how they talk about our category now. So anything in the lawn and garden space, as well as if they've talked about our products in the past. And we also check and see, are they talking about any competitors? Like, is there a recent, campaign or activation that they did with a competitor beforehand? A really important part of the, beforehand process is also, again, kind of setting up a really clear brief and expectation so that they understand, what we're trying to achieve, but also what some of the limitations are. Because I think, houseplants are really having a moment right now, right? They're all over Instagram. It's so fun. People love, taking pictures of planting things and potting things, and the first thing you want to do is dig your hand in the dirt. Technically, you're not supposed to do that. We're not allowed to show you putting your hands in the dirt. It's recommended that you use gloves, and that's what's on the packaging. So even though influencers are sending back this awesome pic of their kids dirty and gardening, we're yikes, we can't be posting that. So just setting clear expectations beforehand to help them understand kind of what some of our challenges are. And from a launch perspective, just having really clear visibility into when stuff is going live, being able to check and see what's happening. We set up social listening monitors when we can, when things are tied to kind of a certain campaign or hashtag, just to track conversation that's going on. And from a post-campaign perspective, really making sure where possible, we are able to kind of implement tracking that we can look back into our own, own data to verify what's happening. So using tags, driving to owned properties, really kind of making sure that we're able to verify data and performance on our end instead of relying on the influencers to just, pass over totally pure data that we're looking for.
Excellent, thank you. Do I get one more question? Or?
Let's see if the audience has some questions, and then
Okay.
we'll give you a wrap. Anybody
right,
have any
sounds
questions
good.
for the panel? Right. Oh, back over here.
Hi, Lyle from Maverick Influencer Marketing Platform. Love this panel. I have so many questions. I guess
Is it
the
our
one.
outfits? We didn't plan this.
Yeah, the coordination is
We
great.
did.
Yeah, it's great. One question: what's the one pain point within influencer marketing you wish someone could just wave a magic wand and fix for you guys?
Great question. Who wants to take it?
Only one.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Exactly.
I think for us, we're working with real people, so you're not in control at the end of the day. And I think as marketers, we try to plan as much as we can and really aim for success. But it's a personal relationship, and you never really know what someone's going to produce until it's done. And I think, for me, the lack of visibility or control in the process can be a little bit frustrating. So that would be my one pain point, I think.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think, we are marketers, not always talking to marketers, right? These, they're not always natural to, create a certain kind of content with the look and marry everything together. Oftentimes these are just people who just have really interesting point of views and have created an audience, and just being able to kind of close that gap and just, more clearly be able to, talk on the same plane and, be able, I think that ladders up to efficiency of just, speed, being able to kind of manage relationships like that directly.
I think my only build would be direct sales attribution. Would be really helpful.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
I was going to just say visibility into the influencers' analytics or whatever data they have on their side can often be a challenge to capture.
Okay, we're at the end of the day, so I want to hear an epic fail that you've had in influencer marketing.
That was one of our questions.
Oh, okay.
That's a good wrap question. Where has this gone off the rails, and in a way that you learned the most from?
So I nominated myself as tribute to talk about the epic fail. So here's where things have failed, and I have a specific client in mind that will remain nameless for obvious reasons. Is when you try to work with influencers and you try to, and if it's a regulated industry, even if it's not heavily regulated, a lot of times the marketer gets in their mind that the influencer needs to communicate with the same vernacular that the marketers do internally, or how they communicate in their ads. And so there was a very specific instance where we probably, those influencers will never want to work with us again, because I think that their copy went through 8 rounds of revisions and legal review, and I don't even like, you would have looked at their posts, not, humans don't talk like that, right? And so the campaign itself was, I think, very painful for the influencer. I think the learning for us was certainly, at the upfront, we should have kind of been better coaches, provided better guidance to the client, and set expectations better, right? So the epic fail was the amount of pain and disdain that these influencers now have for people who made their lives miserable.
You made people who hate marketers even more than they already did.
Listen, like,
we can do that. This is
like,
possible. We can do that.
You just like sulk away, right? You're like, sorry.
Did that content also end up being less authentic?
Oh yeah, yeah, all around. It did not perform.
Did you measure afterwards whether they then used their audience against the brand?
Yeah. Yeah, no, we definitely, the metrics were not kind of where they should have been, simply because the followers are like, what are you saying? This is gibberish, right? Like, I don't know what you're talking about. So yeah, they do. Absolutely, absolutely. And so this was, fortunately, yeah, exactly. Fortunately, this was, this was a couple years ago, and I think that influencers have gotten smarter, feel like they can say no more, right? Because they're getting paid real money. So I think even though it's gotten more expensive, I think it is to the benefit that they can be a little bit more selective with whom they work for.
Ending on a note of failure, but I think appropriately enough.
Sure.
Carrie, thank you very much. That was a very successful panel. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
We are going to wrap the day. I want to thank all of our speakers today. They all brought their A game. I really appreciate the work that they put into it. I think they really showed that people were waiting to talk about this as a category, as a topic in and of itself, and the ways in which digital has woven into CPG and the subtlety I think we saw come out, and the ways in which this topic really touches on all of the key points of change and pain in marketing right now, from how brands are built, whether media really matters anymore, the ways in which brands need to weave their ways into the rituals of everyday life. This topic, I think, addresses all of that. It's an ongoing conversation. We'll be doing this again next year. I'd love to hear from you if you have ideas for what topics we need to talk about next. So please ping me online. I'd love to hear from you. And finally, the sponsors who stepped up and decided to help sponsor and support our first ever effort in this category: Lotame, Maverick, R3, Velasas, Response, T-Vision, and Keen. Thanks very much for your support, and thank you for all of your great questions and input today. So I hope we'll see you next time.